Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff, I just finished up an incredible conversation with comedian Ritch Shydner. This is a guy who I've had on my radar for a long time. I just knew who he was through comedy and just being a fan of comedy. This is a guy who did, I think, like 14 appearances, something like that, 14 or 15 appearances on The Tonight Show when Johnny Carson was the host and like 7 million people a night were watching. He also got sober in 1985, and his stories about comedians, hanging out with Sam Kinison, hanging out with Eddie Murphy, obviously the drugs that he did, Ritch, and the drinking that he did is unbelievably epic, and it led to him getting sober, and now he carries the message, and it's a great, informative, inspiring, and entertaining message, and I'm privileged to share it with you guys today. And I'm always privileged to spend some time with this guy. Just came back from California. Kevin hosted. Here he is, folks. Kevin Souza.
He's a young, funny man whose name I've been butchering all night long. He's from New Jersey originally. He'll be at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach this week, and at the Improvisation in San Diego the 11th of November for 1 week. Would you welcome Ritch Shydner?
You grew up in South Jersey. I'm from Philly, so I'm kind of, and I hear it in your voice, in your accent. But
yeah.
You grew up in South Jersey, right?
Yeah, that's right. Pennsville, a little town called Pennsville, right across from Wilmington, Delaware, where the Twin Bridges are.
And so what was life like at home for you? I mean, alcoholism in your family?
Sure. My dad was young. My mom was young when I was born. They were 19, and my dad was struggling. You know, they had 3 kids by the time he was 25. And they were just pushing to try to succeed, try to make a living, get by. My dad grew up with his own sort of craziness. To when he was growing up, he was treated like the bastard son. He didn't know he was, but he was the bastard son. And so he had a drinking problem and he had a lot of anger and sporadic violence and that sort of thing.
Do you find, like, you always hear this, but like the comedian, right? Like there's a lot of pain there in some comedians in that personality. Growing up in a household like that, did you find that to be the case with yourself?
Oh yeah, I was very angry, very fearful, which, you can't express fear. You can express anger. At least I found it easier to express anger. And you can live in fear. I mean, I had anxiety attacks. I had panic attacks. I was 8 and 9. Didn't know what they were. Lay in bed, couldn't breathe. So
at 8 and 9 years old.
Yeah, I remember this because we were still living down in by the river then, and my brother and I were in the same room, and I was on the top bunk, and I just remember, I clearly remember that those, and they continued for a while. They continued until I started drinking when I was about 12.
So you start drinking at 12. Is that the magic bullet? I mean, it was for me.
It was magic. It was magic for me.
Yeah.
Magic. Everything I've ever heard other people describe was true for me.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I felt inside. I'd always felt outside. Even around my friends, I felt like they knew something I didn't know, and I couldn't quite make a connection. And all of a sudden, I felt inside with everybody. I felt, brave, funny. I felt everything. I felt, I could talk to girls when I started drinking. I all the things I couldn't do before, I could do. I could dance when I was drinking. All those things that 11 or 12-year-old, I was 12 years old. So all those things, and it gave me fearlessness, which is, it gave me freedom, really. Freedom from my fears, which was huge for me at that time.
Dude, same exact thing. I tell people it was like my first spiritual experience was
absolutely
getting drunk, and I really felt like I had reached a whole nother level, and I was like driven by fear too. Still am, right? When I'm not kind of doing my thing, but I was totally fearful, and it took that fear away. Were you an outgoing guy to begin with, even before you drank, or did that switch turn on?
I think, around certain people, I mean, at certain times I would be obviously very quiet and withdrawn. If adults were around, I was very withdrawn and quiet. But around certain people when I was young, friends of mine told me I always was funny. Now, funny was important in my house. My dad loved funny. He had comedy records. If a comedian came on the Ed Sullivan show, everybody shut up. He loved Jackie Gleason, the comedy. He loved comedy. So my dad gave me that. He had a sense of humor. He had a great sense of humor. Still does. And he was a funny guy. So in my household, laughter was a huge commodity. I mean, nobody got hit. Nobody got yelled at when there was laughter. And for me, it got me out of a lot of trouble. It had value to me at an early age.
It's so funny. I can relate because when Peter Jennings or Jim Gardner, right, Action News, either of those came on, we couldn't talk. My dad was like, those guys were important. So now I'm in the news business. It makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, it was like, man, and it was totally subconscious, but it's like, those people are important. Oh. Did your dad get to see? I
just want to say one thing. There was I don't know who said this, but someone said, if you want to be happy with your choice of careers, choose something that your parents loved but weren't great at.
There you have it. You'll get all the attention you need, right?
You'll get the attention and validation from them, but you'll succeed where they didn't succeed. That's a great feeling.
So your father is sober now, by the way.
Yes, he is.
So you got sober before him?
I got sober about 3 years before him. I made amends to him, and then he came back and made amends to me. It was unbelievable. Yeah. I certainly didn't think that getting sober was going to lead to him getting sober, but he told me that it did. My amends to him pointed out to him without me saying it. He said, "You never said anything I did. You only talked about your thing." But he could think of when I left was all he had done to my mother and my brother, sister, and myself. That's all he could think about. And it sort of led to him getting sober.
Did he start going to meetings and stuff?
Yeah. He in our hometown in Pennsville. He did, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you get sober in 85, but before that, there's a lot of comedy. There's about 8 years of it. In 77, you start professionally. Yeah. How did you get started? I mean, I
started professionally in 79, but my first time on stage was 77.
Okay,
but
77.
I had like two full years in Washington, D.C. doing stand-up. I was funny in law school. I was in law school, and one of my classmates, Howard Vine, said, "You were always being funny all the time. Made professors laugh. You were funny." And so we came back from winter break over January 77, and he goes, "I'm taking you down. You're going to do comedy." I don't think we knew call it stand-up. I don't think we did. I was going to go do a comedy thing by myself on stage at this coffee house in Washington, D.C., the Iguana Coffee House. and Roberta Flack had sort of been discovered there. So they had some sort of like local fame to it.
Yeah.
Like it drew people. But yeah, that's where I did it first time.
How the hell, what is that like? Because I think our environments now are sort of controlled, even though they're not. So, you spent your career, or at least the early stages of it, right? You're opening up for rock and roll groups, or you're performing at a coffee house, places where they're not expecting comedy. You're posting up and starting to do comedy.
No. This was 1977. There were showcase clubs, which I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware for a year. I was doing it for a year before a friend of mine told me, there are young comics at clubs up in New York City. There were Los Angeles and New York City. There were scenes in San Francisco. We didn't know about them. I just started doing it. There were not comedy clubs all over the place. People weren't aware of it. When I used to walk on stage opening up for rock bands, whatever, people look at me like, "What are you going to do? You have no instrument in your hand. What are you doing? What are you doing?" Half the time they didn't even introduce you as comedians. "Please welcome opening act Ritch Shydner." Like I would come out there and do what, a handstand? I mean, they didn't know.
They thought you were a magician.
It was not as imbued in their consciousness that a person with just a mic was a comedian. Like now, if you see, it's iconic, right? If you see someone standing there with a mic stand in front of them, you just think stand-up comic.
Yeah. What was the drinking like back in D.C. before you moved to New York?
No, man, I was doing what I was doing. You know, look, I didn't have the money for cocaine, but I got it. You know? Yeah. Drinking was always part of the game for me, although I didn't drink before I went on. I knew I was an alcoholic before I was an alcoholic. And I tried not to do drugs or drink before I went on. But, of course, every time look, I can tell you a story. In 1981, I opened up for Peter Tosh. He was one of the original Whalers, right?
Sure.
So Bob Marley died, and Peter Tosh went back out on tour. So I'm opening up for him at Washington, D.C. I'm so excited. I'm a huge Whaler fan, and it was a couple thousand people. I forget, it was at DAR Constitution Hall, someplace like that. Rich Hall, another comedian, he calls me up, and he goes, listen, I just opened up for them in Philly. Whatever you do, don't go near backstage. I got a contact tie. I can barely do my act. And, you know, I'm thinking, well, Rich doesn't smoke as much weed as I smoke. You know, I figure I got immunities built up, so I'm not worried about it. Backstage, you know, the night of the show, I'm chain smoking and pacing, and they pinned me as the stand-up comic easily, you know, the opening act. So all of a sudden, and I've never been around guys with dreadlocks. So these guys go, hey, funny man, come over here. And I walk over, and the guy hands me a burning baseball bat. I'd never seen a joint this big in my life. And plus, it was real Jamaican weed. I don't even smoke in Jersey, you know, dirt weed. I mean, it was shake weed. We used to call it shake weed. It was just nothing but leaves and stems and seeds. You know, it was no buds. I took 2 hits of this thing, man. And the next thing you know, I was being introduced like I was underwater. My friend said, I walked out, I laughed for 15 minutes, and I left. That was it. I mean, you know, the only thing that saved me was the audience was high as I was, and they were laughing at what they thought I was laughing at. I don't know. I had those. I went on stage tripping on acid. My girlfriend and I were camping down in Assateague with some people. We were tripping on acid. I had a show that 2 nights, but we kept tripping for 2 days. I show up at the cellar door. I'm high on acid. I go on stage on acid, just ranting. And, you know, I'm lucky that it was just this time when, if you were on stage then, all you had to do was be interesting, because they had no expectations of like laughs per minute that should be like bang, bang, bang. They knew they should get some laughs, but they didn't have like, you know, if you got a few laughs, you could get by. That's what saved me sometimes when I first started. I just got a few laughs. Well,
dude, you were getting by. I mean, you started to experience a lot of success, and I've heard you mention something. You know, it worked for you, right? Like the drugs and the alcohol. It's got to be an interesting situation to be in where your career is going up, up, up with your usage. Did you feel like it was fueling some of your success maybe and your creativity?
Oh, yeah. I thought, and for a long time, I thought I was creative because of the alcohol and drugs. And it took me a while into my sobriety before I realized I was funny in spite of the alcohol and drugs. They helped at a certain point, then they stopped helping. Mm-hmm. Now, some people may make them work for them for time, forever, whatever, but they started working against me. And I had such a creative burst when I got sober. But for early part of my career, look, when you're moving from town to town and there's a loneliness thing, you're a gunslinger coming into town. So the alcohol and drugs helped you bond quickly with local people, right? Obviously. And it eased your entrance and exit into these places where you're just coming in, doing 2 shows and leaving. So that part of it helped. It was obviously social lubricant and all that. And the weed and the acid, I'm sure I came up with ideas when I was on them, but I've come up with better ideas and was able to execute them better when I got sober. So, I mean, you know, I use different things to look. I need to change perspective. That's what a lot of creativity is changing your perspective. And so I use different things now. I run, I meditate, I do different things, and it gives me a change in perspective, and it gives me ideas.
Yeah, it takes a little bit though, right? I mean, you have to. It doesn't.
It took a little bit. It takes a little bit. Yeah. I was so pissed off and angry when I first got sober. I would throw the mic down and walk off. I was frustrated. One time, a friend of mine, he's sober now, Tony. I don't want to give his last name, but anyway, Tony, he was like just like I was sober and he was sober around the same time. We didn't know each other, but he was like testing out, looking at comics to see whether he wanted to get into this thing. Now he's sober. Now he's an actor. And he's in an improv one night in Los Angeles, and I'm on stage, and I'm angry, I'm ranting, and nobody's laughing. And finally, he laughs at something, right? Like he laughs at something. He said, I turned and looked at him, and I went, what the hell are you laughing at? He's like, I don't know, I thought it was a comedy club. I thought I was supposed to laugh, you know? Yeah. It took a while. It was a transition to go from performing when I always had Coke or knew I was going to be drinking afterwards to like being stone sober. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been crazy. I want to get to that, but I kind of want to go over your trajectory. You go up to New York from DC, because that's where that's where the clubs are, right? At that point in time, and this boom is starting to happen. What is it like for you on stage and off stage when you go to New York and you start playing there?
Well, obviously, I went there because I knew that's where it's like playing tennis. You want to play against the best to get better. And
who was up there?
Jerry Seinfeld was up there. Bill Maher was up there. These are names you know now. Larry Miller. There were Richard Bells who he was the king of Catch a Rising Star. There were so many great comics, young comics up there at that time. I was just excited to go up there and compete there to see how I did. I mean, obviously, and to learn.
What was
I was going to learn. I did learn. I watched them. I sit in if I wasn't on stage, I was in the back of the room watching.
Yeah, I heard you tell a story when you whether it was, I guess it was still when you were in DC, but you saw Seinfeld and you were like, all right, I got a little more work to do. Right?
Yeah, well, I told you, I was in 1978. I've been doing it for about a year. And a friend of mine from law school came to see me where I was performing in a place called El Brookman's, where Lewis Black, myself, Kevin Rooney, Ron Zimmerman, a lot of comics who came from the DC area who had professional careers were down there performing. And John Heyman, I mean, I can name it. I'm going to miss some T.P. Mulrooney. But she says, oh, there were comics up in New York doing this. I was like, what? She says, yeah. So she took me up next weekend. We went up to New York City. And we couldn't get in Catch a Rising Star. That was Upper East Side on First Avenue. And couldn't get in the Improv over 44th.
Because why? Because this boom is happening.
They were sold out. They were sold out. Okay. Saturday night. It was Saturday night. They were sold out. So we go over to the comic strip. We got in. And, I'm cocky. I feel like I'm one of the best, if not the best in D.C., at the time, and I'm making money, I'm the opening act for that. And then I sit there and I watch comic after comic, the comic strip. I'm like, I'm as funny as this guy. And then Seinfeld came on, and I was like, at the end of his 15, 20 minutes, I went, I got some more work to do. No, he was good. He was good. You could see he had the goods right at the beginning. He was a master writer and performs like like David Bowie. He moves efficiently. Every bit of his performance is
there's no fat.
And Seinfeld, there's no fat in his performance. And Seinfeld was like that. He was very economical with his performance, and it fit his material perfectly. Yeah.
What's it like for a guy like because I know you ended up running in the same crowd with him. He's kind of a clean comic. Doesn't seem like he's on drugs. But then I'm sure you're hanging out with Kinison. And how do you guys mix worlds? Or was there a mixing of worlds socially? Was there that respect, like, hey, we're all comics. Whatever you do is your business. Let's talk comedy?
Yes, if you talk comedy, when you're around, look, I certainly gravitated and hung out with people. My buddy Mike McDonald from Canada, Kennison, and other people who like to drink and do drugs. But if you're around somebody, you're sitting there at a table and say someone like Seinfeld is there, we talk comedy. I mean, people talk comedy all the time. We were so obsessed. That's one of the reasons I knew I had to go to New York, because people there were 100 comics up there as obsessed as I was about it. And so it was the place to learn. I got so much great advice. I got great advice from Seinfeld. I got great advice from there was a guy up there named Uncle Dirty, who was a contemporary George Carlin and Richard Pryor. And he was hanging out at the showcase clubs. He was 20 years older than all of us. And his advice was so good. His advice was so good. So
what did he tell you? You remember?
So he go, oh my God, so many things. He just would go, and people would go, like, when do I move to LA? Because at the time that was the thing, right? Because there was nothing happening in New York City on television or really. So the big question one day says, you move to New York City when they say, Mort will pick you up at the airport.
You mean you moved to L.A.?
That's when you move to L.A. You move to L.A. when they say Mort will pick you up at the airport.
So then, because Carson was out in L.A., so that's kind of where the whole scene was moving towards.
Yeah, at that time, and then when we moved out in '82, this was before the Letterman show came up, and there was really we used to do things. Sometimes we became my ex-wife Carol Leifer and I.
Yeah, Carol Leifer, huge writer, comedian. Wrote episodes of Seinfeld. She's big time. So you guys must have been a power couple, right? Come on. I mean, it probably
we were just two struggling comics. We were struggling comics, but we look. It was there's nobody keeping the hours that we were keeping. For her, what other guys that she's exposed to stand-up guys. No woman or guy at that time would want to hang around with us, get involved with us. I saw it happen. I saw people get involved with civilians. Like this one guy, he'd keep meeting girls in Jersey. And he'd bring them in, and they'd sit through the first show and the improv watching because all we want to do is do shows. The dates that they'd go on were always coming to watch him perform.
Yeah,
and they'd watch the first show. And they'd laugh like crazy. Then you see them back the second night watching them, and wait a minute, just doing the same stuff, and they're kind of little chuckles, and then the third, they're just staring at them, and then the fourth, you go, "Where's your girlfriend?" We're done.
Yeah.
The fourth date was over. That was it. I mean, we were obsessed. So pairing up with another comic, it was good in a lot of ways. You're keeping the same hours. You're obsessed with the same thing. You're talking comedy all the time. You understand short language.
Was there drugs and alcohol in that relationship? Was she anywhere?
No, she was no.
I mean, I'm sure you cast a pretty big shadow, right, as an alcoholic.
Yeah, I was going to say that is exactly. Pete, that is the perfect way to put it. I cast a big shot. A lot of women were able to drink and do drugs in my shadow and not be noticed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody was going to notice you doing drugs and drinking if you were hanging around me all the time. Because I'm the big mess. I'm the big, I'm the guy that's, I'm the guy that's got to make sure that it's there. And I was the party captain.
And you get sober kind of early. And before we get to when you got sober in '85, you're doing, like you said, I mean, you're going up on stage on acid, you're going up on stage on coke. Was that something, did you ever do like a huge show, like very high on cocaine? Like, I know you were on Carson, like, was there drugs involved with that?
No, I had again, my thing was, I knew I was, like I said, I knew I was an alcoholic before I knew I was alcoholic. I knew if I started, it was a problem. When I did Carson, my first Carson, I had cocaine in my pocket. I did not do it before the show, but I wanted to make sure I had it for after the show.
Okay.
When I did a couple. Well, here's a story. So Merv Griffin's show, right, was a daytime talk show like Ellen.
Sure.
And so you get bumped. When you get bumped, it means they said they don't have enough time for you, so we're going to bump you, and you'll get paid. You'll get paid whatever it was, $600-700 after minimum, and we'll bring you back another time. So I'm in West Hollywood, and the studio is literally a mile from my apartment. And I got bumped like day, then the next day, 2 days later, bumped again. I mean, I got bumped like 8 times in a row. Now, Merv Griffin had a bar backstage, right, in a green room bar that was fully stocked. They had a bartender, like a guy with a bow tie, tuxedo. They had like a regular old school bartender. You could order any drink you want, and this guy can make it.
And the show was live during the day.
It was live. Yeah, it's
Okay.
live during the day. I had to go over there, whatever, 4:30. They'd say you're bumped. I'd have a couple of cocktails, go home. I made $700, clean and easy in the city. After about 7-8 shows, I started thinking that's my job. I go over, they bump me, they pay me. I have a couple of cocktails to start the evening, and I go on my merry way. So when about the 8th or 9th show, I go, you know what? They're going to bump me anyway. Why wait until after? Let's have a drink right now. So I start drinking. Then, of course, you know what happens.
Yeah.
The town coordinator comes over and says, "You're on next." I go, "Oh shit! I'm slurring my words. I knew I was drunk. I knew." So I go into the bathroom, and now I'm playing that game.
Yeah, trying to even out, right?
Trying to even it out, which is, I used to joke, little coke to go up, a little booze to go down. If I was really good at the end of the night, I could spend $400 to be straight.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's not happening, man. I get too jacked up. I come out. I could tell. I always had a problem with enunciation anyway, but I start talking and I look at the audience and they're confused. What's he saying?
Yeah.
He's talking too fast. He's spot welding words together.
Did you find that to be the case? I whether I read that or heard that, like on Saturday Night Live, a lot of those guys doing blow, right? And they weren't as funny as when they weren't doing it because they would miss their mark or they were just too edgy.
Look, the only thing cocaine, it gives you that feeling of that rush and furia. This is my experience with coke. And, of course, like the George Carlin thing, it makes you feel like a new man. The only problem is the first thing a new man wants another line of cocaine. That old George Carlin joke. But for me, it never worked for me creatively. I never wrote material on coke. It was a talking drug. Now, since I was in the talking business of comedy, you would think it would work great. But I already had adrenaline. When I got on stage, I already had adrenaline. I still have that today.
Yeah.
I have it right now just talking to you because I have adrenaline. So when you have the adrenaline and the coke on top of it, it was just out of control. It's just talking drug, and it's a narcissistic drug. The only thing you ever talk about is yourself, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, it's
not a good drug. It was not a good performance drug for me.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at. I was wondering because again, you said it did assist you to a degree, right? The drugs and alcohol, or at least we think they do, right?
What cocaine did for me? Before I had cocaine, when I was young, I found out very quickly I was a blackout drunk. Now, if you know blackout drunks, I've woken up in car crashes. I've woken up talking to police. Right? You're kind of like, honey, officer, wait a minute. Who is it? I don't know who you're just talking to, but I'm here now. So catch me up. Where are we? You don't have blackout is the scariest thing. And I was young. I found black beauties and white crosses, Christmas trees. They were, amphetamine.
Speed, yeah.
At the time, right. So there wasn't meth like it is today. So, but these pills were available, and I found them, and I get them, and I had to have them. Or I became, I was a drunk driver, but with the speed, I became a wide awake drunk driver.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things, mixing the speed, the tablet form of speed, yeah, and alcohol. Right. It was just because something about it, you felt like you were in control, but you weren't.
You weren't, no. But my problem again was with the speed. I was impatient. So imagine that, an alcoholic being impatient. So I'd take a Black Beauty, have a couple of drinks, and then wasn't feeling it. So I double up. I take another one. And it's not saying that. Then I took 3. Now I got 3 in me, and now and then they hit, and now I'm like amped, and I got to try to bring the alcohol again. That balancing game. For some reason, cocaine again. I love the ritual of cocaine, the chopping it up, making the lines, all that sort of thing. And I felt like I could moderate the intake better. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, right? But
yeah, of course.
Really was my thought process.
So I want to talk a little bit because people that are listening to this, I think some people really do know comedy, and some may not have the idea of how just huge that boom was and how huge it was to be on Carson. I mean, that was it for you guys and girls. And I was looking at numbers before I came in here. About 7 million people or more would watch Carson, like in your heyday. And if you hit on Carson, that's it. You're getting development deals and stuff that happened to you. What is that like going out there?
Well, it was huge. I'll tell you how stressful it was. I mean, of course, I was drinking and doing coke. I managed to stop 2 weeks before my date. I stopped everything, right? I broke out in shingles. I was 31 years old. The doctor couldn't believe it. I walked in there. I didn't know what they were. These bloody, painful blisters on my butt cheek and the top of my back of my thigh. That's where they broke out on me. So I'm like a day before I'm doing Tonight Show. I had these medicated pads I had to wear. That's how stressful it is when you do your first Tonight Show back then. It was everything. First of all, you knew the whole comedy community was going to be watching. You knew everybody pretty much in comedy back then. You knew everybody would be watching because they all knew when a new comic was coming on. And you felt like this was your big shot, a validation. Tonight Show was big time validation. You know, I wouldn't have to explain to anybody else that I was working a club in Cincinnati or a club in Las Vegas. I mean, I was on the Tonight Show. That was validation.
What is that like for an alcoholic and drug addict and their ego at the time? Once you do it, because you do it and it goes well.
Yeah. So they'll go, you're coming back. He said, you're coming back in like 2 months. You're coming back pretty fast. Not like Stephen Wright fast, but for me, I felt good. And everybody told me, oh, that's good. You're coming back like in a month or something. That's great. You know. Well, next time I come back, my disease has progressed, you know, and my alcoholism, drug addiction is harder. I can't control it. And so I'm like, the night before, I think I'm doing well because I'm not doing cocaine, but I'm drinking with Sam Kennison.
You're drinking with Kennison?
Sam, yeah, Kennison he's doing the coke, and we're going to party the next night after. Yeah, and he's telling me, you know, because I've gone over my set for him. Of course, you know, I'm telling him what I'm doing. My ending of my set is just not. There's no edge to it. There's no. That's Sam. You know, it's like you got this good material, this thing you're doing, this new thing you're doing. I had a bit about Jesus as an entertainer because we went and saw this band called Striper, which was a Christian metal band back then. And the guy came out and said, you know, Jesus was the first rock and roller. So I did a whole bit. I said, Jesus was a rock and roller. Means he was in show business. Must have an agent. You know, I had whole thing, him talking to his agent. I said he had tour jackets, you know, Jesus World Tour 1BC. You know, I had, you know, roadies, get the wine jugs over to Galilee. We got a show tomorrow night, you know, the whole thing, right? So he says, Sam says, that's what you got to do, man. That's a killer. That's a brilliant bit. You know? So I went the next day, you know, I'm like hungover, jacked up on adrenaline.
And you have to submit your set to them, right? So they know.
The set was set. No, the set was set.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a guy I'm not Albert Brooks. I don't have any kind of David Brenner, you know, leeway to do whatever I want. I had a set that was totally approved. I come in the next day. I'm trying to talk to Jim McCauley, and they let me do this Jesus the Entertainer bit as my clothes, you know, because you can't do that.
And Jim McCauley is like the guy who oversees the comics on the show.
Yeah, he was the guy overseeing the comics. No, you can't do that. So then I go, you know, being an alcoholic obsessed, I go, well, I have this other new bit about, there was a guy, I can't remember his name was, God, I want to say Barney Clark, I think it was, but the guy who had the first artificial heart.
Okay.
That was a new thing. And I had a whole bit about getting an artificial heart. You know, they said, you know, that he would not, it would impact his life. I said, it impacted his life. He had an 800-pound machine he was tied to.
Yeah.
It's got to affect his bowling game. He's got 4 guys pushing him down the lane with him. Come on, guys, keep up. I'm trying to get a fair here. Right? And then I had a whole bit about the defibrillator paddles, you know. And so I talked Jim McCauley and approved me to let me do those 2 bits, right? Just completely obsessed alcoholic. And I badgered him into it, and he approved it. The only thing that saved me, because Johnny Carson hated those 2 bits. He was a 4-pack-a-day smoker who had living fear of heart attacks. So my last 2 bits were about heart disease and heart attacks, and he hated it. And I wouldn't have got back on the show. Eventually, I got back on the show because when I got sober, Jim McCauley came over the end of that night. He rushed me off the stage, backstage, rushed me in my dressing room, said, stay right here. I mean, he knew Johnny was pissed.
Wow.
Everybody did. And he said, stay here. And then afterwards, he came after the meeting in Johnny's office, and Johnny says, I don't want to see that guy again, basically. Jim McCauley comes back and says, Mike, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have let you do them, but you're off the show. Then I got sober a year later, and McCauley, I didn't say anything to him, never talked to him. I'm just doing my thing. McCauley sees me and says, your whole attitude has changed. You're a different performer, and this new material is great. I'm going to try to get you back on. And he got me back on and ended up doing like 12 more Tonight shows with Johnny.
That's unbelievable. I didn't know that. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. There's a funny story. You know, talking about third step, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when he still try to get back on, he says, you got to go do a Merv Griffin show. It's sort of like a baseball player when they're rehabbing in the minors before they get back to the majors. Right?
Yeah.
So go to do a Merv Griffin show. I said, sure, no problem. So I go to do a Merv show, and I'm backstage with Les Sinclair, who was the comic handler on that show, and he says, "Listen," he comes up and he says, "Listen, this audience out here is a totally Jewish audience, all older people from a Jewish retirement home. That's pretty much the entire audience." I'm like, "Why are you telling me this? I got a safe Merv Griffin shot planned here." This is like, I don't even know why he's telling me this. So we go backstage behind the curtain. I'm the next performer. Diane Cannon is out there.
Oh man, yeah,
and
gorgeous.
Diane. She's promoting a movie she had just done, Jenny, and Merv Griffin's like, "This is tremendous work, Diane. Tremendous work. Let's watch a clip." And they put the clip on all the monitors in the studio. It's her. She's in a concentration camp. She's in a death camp, and Nazis are beating her up. Then he goes, "Oh, that's a great work. Let's bring out our next entertainer." This is me. They introduced me. I'm blonde hair, blue eyed. I might as well have goose stepped out onto the stage. Here comes the job. Here comes the job. These people are in shock. It's like you could see them. I could see them just, they're in shock from what they just saw. And I my first joke is nothing. It's nothing. And I remember that Seinfeld had said, maybe not to me, just that it said it, that if you're on TV and a joke doesn't work, just look at the center camera, the red light camera, and nod your head, kind of smile and nod, and time out. They'll put the laughter in later. You just give them a pause there before you start the next one. I did that for 5 minutes. I mean, every joke, nothing. And so, I wanted to leave. I wanted to break from my set and started doing, crowd work.
Yeah, and you're sober at this time.
Yeah, I'm sober, totally sober. I'm sober only about a year or so. Maybe this is before I did my third Tonight Show. So and I'm bombed. I bomb like you can't believe I bomb. I come off stage and Les Sinclair comes up to me. He's like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I knew this could be a problem. I was a half warning I gave you. I should have told you everything. I'm so sorry." And I left her. "That's okay, man. I'm not back on a Tonight Show." And but I call up my sponsor. I mean, I'm freaked. I'm pissed. I'm really angry. God bless you. Thanks a lot. I'm doing the right thing. And look at
Yeah.
And my sponsor's like, "Get to a meeting and put your hand out to a newcomer." I mean, newcomer. I'm a year so glad there. Go out there. Go to a meeting. And I call him back. Payphones. These aren't cell phone times. I call him back and I'm angry again. I want to meet. Go to another meeting. Go to a meeting. And he had me doing, all I did was the first three steps, and the third step prayer and 7-step prayer. I didn't even know what the 7-step was,
Yeah.
But so he got, just go to a meeting. Your primary purpose is to stay sober, help somebody else. That's it. The rest of it's all bull, just go. So I'm just going. I'm just doing what I'm told to do, And a couple nights later, Jim McCauley comes up to me in the improv and says, "I heard about your Merv Griffin shot." And I'm like, there you go. "Well, man, I'm going to get out of town, so don't worry about it." I got a U-Haul ready.
It's over.
He says, No. He said, you did a very professional job. There's nothing you could have done other than what you did was a very professional job. You are ready to come back on the Tonight Show. So he gave me a date right then and there for a Tonight Show set. And so I did my third one by bombing on Merv. He absolutely bombed, and I got back to Tonight Show.
And that is the program.
I got to tell you this. One last thing.
Yeah.
They did fill in the laughter. They put the laughter in. Like I got the shot on tape.
Yeah.
And you can hear the audience laughing, right? I do a joke, you hear them laughing, and every once in a while they cut to the audience, and everybody's in shock. Like, where's the laughter coming from? Nobody's laughing. It looks like a ventriloquist act with the entire audience.
But that behavior and the way that you carried yourself moved you to another opportunity on the Tonight Show. And it shows like we never really know. We don't know what's right.
No.
Like that's why we need a sponsor. We need to work with a sponsor. If you're doing the 12-step thing, if you're sober, that's great. I mean, but
I got help. I got a lot of help from a lot of people.
So yeah, let's go. I wanted to ask you about how did you bottom out? Like what was the thing that sent you over the edge and got you sober?
Well, I crossed every line I ever put to cross. I won't steal. I stole. won't sleep with my buddy's girlfriends, or, I did that. I did everything. I crossed every line. Is when my behavior became unacceptable to me, and because I didn't care about being unacceptable to you, it just got to the point where I couldn't stand. I lost my sense of humor. That was the biggest thing. That was my loss that I could not live without. I valued my sense of humor. It was not just my profession. It's what I thought was the best thing about me, was I had a sense of humor about things,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd lost it. I remember sitting. This is true. The comedian Sinbad.
Sure. Yeah.
Sinbad and I were working Texas. We did they hired us. I don't know how we got on the same bill, but they hired us almost like we did a little tour together. We started off doing they have prison rodeo show. It was a yearly event in Texas.
Okay.
I think it was in one of the prior Wilder movies, the prison rodeo. And so they hired us to do entertainment for it. And then we did a couple of one-nighters, and we worked our way over to Austin, Texas, where we did a week at the Comedy Club in Austin, Texas.
This is 85.
He was on fire. He was totally straight. Yeah, it's around 85, beginning of 85.
And this is right before probably he got that a Different World sitcom.
Oh yeah. He was just a middle act. He was my middle act.
Okay.
And he was tough to follow because he was on fire. I was bloated, drinking and drugging too much, smoking too much, and it was affecting me. It was affecting my performance. And he was the first comic I ever worked with as the middle who made me work at that point. And he was on fire. He loved what he was doing. He was clean, no drinking. I never saw him drink, do any drugs or anything. And one night we were sitting in a bar in Austin after the show, and I'm down there at the end of the bar and the end of the table, and I'm just spending a lot of time in the bathroom doing blow and coming back and drinking, shots of whiskey and smoking cigarettes, and I'm miserable. And nobody's really sitting next to me. Everybody's down the other end of the table laughing their butt off with Sinbad. He's telling jokes and stories, and he's laughing, he's engaging with people. And it hit me, I looked, I went, that's what I think I used to be, kind of like that. And I want to be like that again. And enjoying this journey we're on here, doing stand-up comedy and traveling. And I'm not enjoying it anymore. And the difference I can see is not that he's younger than me or that he's black and I'm white. It's that he's not drinking. He's not doing drugs. It was like clear to me. And now other people had said things to me before. People would say you had a problem drinking. Brett Butler did.
Because she was sober, right?
Did. Yeah, she was. Yes, and other people did. And people who aren't necessarily sober, they go, "You got a problem drinking."
Any
and
comics?
I would just move to other people.
Yeah, just move around in different circles. Any comics besides? Because that's interesting. Brett Butler was sober. Anybody else? Any other sober comics that maybe you saw go before you? Because I think I can't even imagine. No. Okay, yeah, because I'm thinking about it. Like we all have our bullshit that keeps us drunk and using, right? Yeah. I would think being a stand-up comedian, that's one very good reason I could talk myself out of getting sober. How do you muster up whatever to make that step, to take those action steps to say I'm going to stop?
Once I got sober, there were a couple of guys. I don't want to break their anonymity, but there were a couple of guys already there ahead of me. And one of them, the guy who was my Eskimo, Mark S. Mark took me off the bar stool. I mean, I was on a bar stool in the Improv, every night drinking and saying I got to quit drinking. And Eddie, the bartender, got sick of hearing me, and I was a problem. I would kick the jukebox. So I didn't like the song. I'd shake it till I moved the song. I mean, I was a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And every time I was drinking, I said, I shouldn't be doing this. I every day I'd get up saying, I'm not going to drink today. I had to drink before I left the house. To get to the Improv, I had to have a drink or two. And then I'd get there drinking. I'd do my show, whatever that was, 15, 20 minutes. And I'd come there and I'd sit in the bar saying, So he took me to my first meeting. So Mark was, I think, like a month or two, only a couple months sober. And he took me to my first meeting. And so I knew somebody. I used to drink with him. So I knew somebody.
I want to ask you, too, how do you get back up there? Like, how do you get the courage to go back on stage? I'll tell you a story, and this is like, I'm just going to put it out there. So when I got when I got sober, I started to do a stand-up comedy. I would go to Stand Up New York. I lived in a halfway house, and then after that, I lived in Jersey City, and I was working for this guy who I went to rehab with. And you're just I'm crushing meetings, and I'd been in broadcast before this, and so I would go over a set. And obviously, I didn't have nearly the experience you did. I'm just saying, it was the hardest thing in the world I think I've ever done, sober. I mean, literally, I would fucking think about it all day, Rich, and I would be like, oh my God, literally, that's why I couldn't carry on. I mean, I was probably terrible too, but the nerves were such that I was like, gosh. So that's why I asked you the question, how did you get back up there sober?
First of all, it was my business, my career, my job, my passion. I still had that passion. Like I said, one of the reasons I got sober was I wanted my sense of humor back. And I had muscle memory. I did have memory of success. I had material that still worked, and so it was just a matter of me getting accustomed to going up there sober. And not just like because I'd been on stage sober, maybe hungover, or at least some chemical still in my body from the night before. But it's not like I'd been on stage drunk or high every time. Uh-huh. And although that was at the end, I know I was drinking on stage and going on stage high, and I know that.
But it was what you did. It was your job. Like,
it's what I did. It's what I did, man. So there was no question I was going to continue doing it because I got sober so I could get back to doing it and love doing it.
Yeah.
That's why I got sober. I mean, I wanted to get back to that.
Well, what was it like for you for your career to continue to take off? Because you get sober and then you're doing and that's a perfect time for comics, right? Because they're development deals, right? Sitcoms. You're probably getting.
Oh my God! Things started happening. I mean, it started happening. I got the Tonight Show back. Then I got Letterman. Then I got Rolling Married with Children and the pilot, the first 7 episodes.
Beverly Hills Cop.
For laughs, Beverly Hills Cop. Roxanne, Tom Smothers calls me to write for them in the summer replacement series the Smothers Brothers did. Things started happening. A lot good things were happening to me, and then like you said, I got up to just for laughs, and I come off the gala show, and my agent's like, I'm going in right now and make a deal for you for a network. You know what? Yeah. They want to make a network deal, do a show about you, like a sitcom with you, right? Yeah. And so all those things, I got so much good feedback within, 2 years. A lot of good feedback. I mean, the first, I did a summer tour though. I call it my rehab tour, where I got sober in May, but I didn't have any work, really. So, Comedy Zone, gave me like a 5-week tour of like one-nighters, and outside there wasn't their main Charlotte room or all these little places in the South. I got a rental car. I just drove around for like 5 weeks in the summer, sort of rehabilitating my reputation and getting performing, instead of like struggling at the Improv every night. I was out there doing those shows and getting better again, getting sober, comedy under my belt.
So that's another thing I wanted to ask you. You're back in that world. There's a lot of drinking and drug usage. Did you continue to just hit meetings a lot? Stay connected with your sponsor?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
He gave me a shoebox filled with cassette tapes of speakers, and they were great. They helped me tremendously, and I was under instruction. I called, a lot of these one-nighters. I drive at night. I get into town, and sometimes they had a noon or early meeting I could go to, that sometimes sort of thing, because my show's that night. So I couldn't really do too many night shows. I had a night off in between. Sometimes I did. I was always reaching out for help, no matter where I went.
And that's how it's done, dude. I mean, right? Yeah, it just, that's a great blueprint for a life like that. Like I got a buddy who's a bartender. Well, he actually manages bars. He's been in the restaurant industry forever, and he just got sober about 3 months ago. And my thing was like, hey, I think you can do whatever you want to do as long as you work a strong program. There's nowhere we can't go, right? That's the idea of this whole thing. I heard a guy say once, recovery 12-step, it's not a bridge it's not a tunnel to more meetings. It's a bridge to life.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I had just, that whole thing of, to me, it was, I put it like everything everybody told me, like you're there for a reason. I go into the bar, right? It's a bar. I'm working bars. I go into the comedy club, I do my show, and I would leave, man. I wouldn't hang out. I mean, I went out of there like the house was on fire.
Singleness of purpose.
Yeah, right. Singleness of purpose. I'd get out of there. I'd go right back to the hotel, whatever. I'd go out to eat with somebody if there were usually somebody else who was sober or whatever come around, one reason or another, and I'd hang out. I just hung out with different people. I mean, I had a slip where I went back out to Atlanta. After about 44 days sober. About
about 44. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good alcoholic. You remember exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And I went to Atlanta, which used to be a problem for me, and I insisted on hanging out with the people I used to hang out with after the show. In fact, I said, you know what? I'll cut up the lines of cocaine. Give me something to do. I'm real good at that. And I'm also good at deciding how big a line you should have. So that's what I decided. And of course, I went out. I mean, a tray of drinks came up with an extra Heineken on it, which is my beer of choice.
Yeah.
And I was off and running for a week. And it was a lesson. It was a lesson. I got lucky that I got back, and I got back to LA, and I just rededicated myself and did everything I was told to do. And that's what it was. I mean, I got advice that I took as commandments. I was desperate, man, not to go back there again, because that week out was a hell. It was totally hell, man. Because every line of cocaine, I was like, shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
every shot of whiskey, like that was a mistake. I mean, there was not one bit of gleeful party left in me. There's not one.
So when you keep going, I mean, what's it like? What's it like for people that don't know? You're on the set of Beverly Hills Cop 2. You're around Eddie Murphy, who there's no bigger star at that point.
No.
What's it like for you as a sober guy to be like, wow, here I am? That's got to be pretty incredible.
I'm at the Playboy Mansion. It was funny. Eddie's like, hey, come hang out. They had a situation where it was fun. I was getting bold, I was getting bold in all the right ways.
Yeah.
So Eddie and he said, come hang out with me. They had a delay. They're not ready for Eddie on the scene he was supposed to do. So he's out of his trailer. He's in the back. We're in the back of the Playboy Mansion. So he's out to where they have all these geese or whatever. He's feeding them. He got some assistant goes to get some bread and he's feeding the geese or whatever. And then they say, we're ready for you now, Eddie. Eddie goes, well, I'm not ready for you.
Because they made him wait.
And I'm standing there, so I go, that's pretty good power.
Yeah.
So finally, they went up there waiting, and he goes up and we do the scene. And in the background, they had a whole bunch of Playboy bunnies who were playmates, whatever, playing volleyball, right? And behind where the scene was being shot. I shot for like 2 days. I think I was on screen for like 10 seconds.
Okay.
So they're doing they're playing volleyball, and the director keeps yelling, jump higher. He wants to get the jiggle going. He wants to get the jiggle going. They're all in bikinis, So finally I said to Eddie, Eddie, there's too much silicone out there to get the jiggle going. And he does his Eddie Murphy laugh, right? And the director goes, what? And Eddie tells him, he said, Shydner, he goes, Shydner just said there's too much silicone out there to get the jiggle you want. And the director went, oh, you're right. All right, let's move along. So I was like, the guy was like, to me the rest of the day, guy knew who my name was. Hey, Shydner, come here. The director was like, yeah, okay, talk.
And
so getting bold in the right way.
Yeah, because it takes balls to roll the dice on a joke like that, probably, on a movie set. And it's like, but yeah, you have that self-esteem. You do esteem building things, right? And you have that self-esteem. Like you mentioned, you make amends to your dad, and then he ends up getting sober. Some of those development deals, I mean, they didn't work out, right? I mean, they did because you got money, but what's the
got money, man.
Yeah. What's the closest you came?
We had a series I did with a guy named Rick Dukerman, God rest his soul. He was a very funny comedian. He was a heavy guy. They had a great idea for a series, which is almost like what my role could have been on. I was supposed to be on Married with Children. Was he was going to be my best friend who was still single while I'm married, trying to live the married life. He's having the single life, right?
Okay.
Does whatever he wants to do with whoever he wants to do it, whatever he wants to do it, right? So that was called Buddies, I think. ABC. Here's one he's listening to showbiz. I think it was ABC. I had done all the networks. By the time I was finished, I'd done like 5 pilots. I think it was
Wow.
5 or something. But at the time, there were 4 networks: Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS. I'd done them all, and then ABC second time. And so when we were shooting this thing, the executives are like, and the producers are like, "Oh my gosh, this is so funny and so good. If ABC doesn't want it, we already know CBS has already contacted us. NBC's contacted us. They want it. They want it first option. They want a shot at it. They want it. They want it. So we're if ABC doesn't pick us up for the fall, no problem. You know." No, of course ABC doesn't pick it up. Then you go, "What happened to NBC?" "No, they're not interested." "I thought CBS wanted it." They don't want it's damaged goods.
How do you deal with failure in sobriety like that?
Well, it's the same. You know, I learned from the Merv Griffin episode that I'm supposed to show up, suit up and show up and do the best I can and let the rest go.
Yeah.
And that's all I ever did. And it was disappointing along the way. You still, it's hard. It's like somebody once said, "Yeah, I let things go, but you can see my claw marks on them."
Yeah. I
You know,
mean,
right? Yeah. I let things go after they beat me over the head with it for about a half an hour. You know, but I learned those lessons all along the way, and because I kept showing up to learn more and kept repeating the good habits I had, that it became, you know, okay, well, there's something else coming. I mean, I've heard that so many times, and I started experiencing it. You know, okay, there's something else coming. I mean, when my last pilot didn't go, I had a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm out on the road, and my agent, William Morris, dropped me after that last pilot. There's nothing here for you in LA, but here's a bunch of dates. We're not going to give you commission. They gave me 20 dates. You know, they go, "No commission, don't worry about it. It's like a parting gift." You know, the game show where you got blown out. You know, here's your parting gift. No commissions on these gigs. So I go out. The first thing I do is Charleston, South Carolina.
You there? Allison, you there? Did we lose his audio? Was that on our end?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Can
got
hear
you.
me?
I lost you for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I go out to the William Morris drops me.
Yeah, okay.
They give me these gigs. First one I go out is Charleston, South Carolina. It's a new sports bar across from a new minor league hockey rink. Whatever the year was, 91, 92. The Eagles' healthy is over at 4. It was endless. They're playing across the street. The hockey place is packed, and our bar is packed. And the comedy club in the upstairs of the bar is packed. And I get on stage, and this guy starts heckling me. Really good heckling, though. Smart. Knew when to come in, knew when to back off. I'd do a run of jokes. I'd stop to pause, take a drink of water. He'd come back with more heckling. We're both getting big laughs for our heckling and our repartee. I mean, it's like a team. We're like a comedy team. At the end of the show, manager comes over and says, "You know who that was heckling?" I said, "No, I have no idea." He said, "That's Sean Penn."
No.
Sean Penn. What's he doing in Charleston, South Carolina on a Tuesday night? You know what I mean? Well, apparently Sean was doing a movie down there, had come to see the Eagles, expecting it to be, you know, party time, but they were on the rehab leg of their tour, right? So instead of cocaine and women backstage, it's, you know, sushi and fruit juice.
Yeah.
So he comes across to see what's going on at the comedy room, and he wants to hang out with you. So we hang out all night long, him and I hanging out, telling stories, joking, got a little audience in the manager's office. I'm just drinking Diet Cokes and smoking cigarettes or whatever.
Yeah.
At night, 5 a.m, I go, "I'm done, man. I got to go home." Got back to the hotel. He goes, "Oh, before you go, I got to say something to you, man. I got to say something." And I think he's going to go, "You and me need to do a movie, man." Right? He goes, "You need to move to Los Angeles." I go, "I've lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. I thought he knew who I was. He just thought he stumbled across a funny guy in South Carolina. That's all he thought."
You could be somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, "You moved to Los Angeles." So I go back to my room. I go, "I'm not getting anywhere. I got a kid, so you know, and I know a new, you know, wife, and what am I doing out here?" And so this is again somebody I know who's sober. So, and the next day when I'm talking, he complains, he says, "Look, man, you like to write, everybody thinks you're a good writer. Why don't you go write for TV? Get off the road, man. Do something else. Got me into a TV writing career. I call up, I take direction. I call up everybody I know who's got a sitcom. They're in the middle of their production year, so I'm not looking for a job right then. I'm just looking to set something up for next fall, right? This is like February, March. I call up Tim Allen, Roseanne, Seinfeld. I leave messages. Roseanne calls me back that night, says, "You want a job? I love you. Come tomorrow at the studio." I had a job the next day. I just did what I was told to do.
Wow.
I just took some direction.
How did you like writing?
And that disappointment led me. I love writing, but it was a big adjustment. Again, a huge adjustment to become a sitcom writer as opposed to stand-up, where you're running everything. You're in control of everything as you're in stand-up. And I was, at the end of the line, new guy in writing. I had to, start over again in a way.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I love writing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what was that like being sober out there for that whole second act? If you could kind of put a bow on it, like, all the people you came in contact with, you had to have helped a lot of people, I would imagine.
This is what I got a chance to see other comics. Other comics are sober today who said, you helped me get sober. That's huge to me that I was able to, and there's people in the audiences. I mean, a guy just celebrated 3 years yesterday who he said, you started working with me 30 years ago. You didn't know it. He'd contact me from time to time. He said, I'd say, oh, I'm off. And you never say, hey, you got to quit. No, you just go, hey, I feel great today, man. Sorry you're hungover. I mean, he got 3 years now, and he'll it has been an unbelievable ability. I've made friends in towns where I went and met people because they were like-minded, doing the same things I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And those friendships, they weren't like, friendships I used to make when I don't remember guys who were coke dealers, and we were rock stars coming through town. We met every coke dealer in town.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of them. I don't have any relationships with them, but a lot of other people that helped me stay sober while I was in Atlanta or Austin, Texas, or whatever, that I'm still in contact with, still friends with.
Did Kinnison lean on you when he was trying to get sober?
Yeah. My first one, he's, it's like a lot of guys, there were other guys that got sober and they go, I want you to sponsor. I say, I can't sponsor you, man. I'm too close to you on this. And he found something else, but I'd always talk to him. He had a problem and I said this to somebody else anyway. I said this on this TV show I just did an interview for. He had a problem that Greg Giraldo had a bit of a problem when I talked to him once, that guys who were having a hard time with thinking that they I had this feeling, I told him this, you feel like you've run out of jokes. That was part of like losing my sense of humor. I felt like I couldn't write anything anymore, and I was out. Sam Kinison felt like he couldn't top his necrophilia bit that he had.
Yeah.
Remember that bit? It's a great classic bit.
Yeah, it keeps going and going.
Yeah. It never ends.
Yeah.
That I was trying to explain to him about that once you put that down, all those drugs and alcohol, you'll have a new way to get, material. You'll have a whole new influx of material from a different perspective. I kept talking about that. Also, had a hard time giving up that certain people had become bigger stars than them.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing of like, I go, look, that ability to just show up and do your job and not worry about what everybody else is doing or how they were doing is huge. I mean, you try to explain to them that, look, I've seen so many people blow by me. Look, Jeff Foxworthy was my MC at one point.
Yeah.
I'm writing for him later and grateful that I could. Everybody has to just you kind of accept where you get. But Kinnison had a real hard time with other people becoming bigger stars or drawing bigger, whether it was Dice Clay or whatever at the time. He had things that could not let go in his mind. But he was struggling and trying to. He kept showing up. I mean, he might be passed out in the doorway, but he was trying to get in the room. He was trying to do it. When he died in a car crash, he was trying.
And that's an example of how lucky we are.
I know. I know. I mean, it's like the same thing of the drugs seem like they're even more dangerous than
Yeah.
when I was out there. Yeah, fentanyl was another thing that was not in our equation. Was not anything you had to consider when you've got cocaine.
Yeah.
You worry about baby powder, too much baby powder.
Yeah.
Too much laxative.
Yeah.
If you're running to the bathroom all the time, you're more regular than you got high. But there was no fentanyl.
I mean, and I was talking to my brother this past weekend about it. He's sober too, and he was, a buddy of his went for a bachelor party and died. This is not an alcoholic, a guy who partied, and did some coke, and it was laced with fentanyl, and he's dead. The stakes are even higher. I mean, they're high enough. Anytime you take a drink or a drug and you're an alcoholic, but now it's like it's a war zone out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things different. I mean, obviously the drunk driving ethos changed in America. Back in the early part of the '80s, when I was in the height of my addiction, and the clubs were just opening, they let you do as long as you want to do. They weren't selling alcohol to the audience, so they let you do long shows. They didn't care.
Yeah.
They just wanted to sell liquor, and then that changed. And for me, it changed. I mean, I quit drinking. So at 85 or so, the clubs started becoming responsible, and they were doing time shows. They would have the checks drop at a certain time and all that sort of thing. But all those dangers that we had drunk driving was probably the biggest danger, not fentanyl.
Yeah, seriously. A couple more thoughts for you before I let you get out of here. What made you decide to kind of come out per se and speak out about recovery and stuff like that? Because it's important.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things that happened. There were some books that came out when we first got sober. I can't remember them. I got them stashed away somewhere. They're not out on my recovery shelf here. But there were things that people, we did where we were able to do it with anonymity and talk about it in a general way about addiction. There were those from the beginning, but they were if I could help somebody. I mean, I didn't, as long as I can do it in an anonymous way and say, hey, if you want to talk to me personally, I can tell you what I did, the help I got to get sober. It was always a part of it, especially because comics tend to be so, like, tend to be rebellious. We tend to be loners, and so I felt like it was really important that I let other people know that, I never was anonymous in my personal relationship with people in terms of my sobriety. I didn't care who knew. I certainly didn't care who knew when I was drinking and doing drugs.
Yeah.
So I didn't care who knew that I was now sober. I mean, there were people who shunned me. There were, honestly. I lost a job because of it, an acting job. A producer hired me when I was drinking and drugging. I got sober. I no longer came up to his house and partied, and then there was a show cast that was cast as the lead and got fired, and somebody else put in the lead, and the show went on the air.
Wow.
So, I didn't care. It's like if that's it, what it takes. If me drinking and drugging is going to be the prerequisite for that job, then I don't want the job anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. It becomes, becoming sober is like the number one core value for me.
That was it.
When I'm working it right.
And I was modeled that. Yeah. I was modeled that by other people too. I saw other guys. I saw a guy who had a big tour thing going, and that guy was going to put the money up for it and be the producer and all, but he wanted him to drink and do drugs with him. And that guy was sober. He said, nah. And the tour ended,
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that? Before last thing, so you told a story once, or I think it's in your book, Kicking Through the Ashes, or maybe it's in the first one is I Killed, right?
I Killed was the one that Mark Schiff and I did. We compiled all these stories. Yeah, that was, and the Kick Through the Ashes one I wrote. Yeah,
these books are awesome. You can find them on Amazon. I'll link all that stuff on your website. But who is this guy? I'd never heard of this guy. The guy Ollie Joe.
Oh, Ollie Joe.
Jesus. What the hell?
He was the first. Yeah, he was a guy who, talk about a road wreck. He was one of those guys. He was see, back then, I told you, in the beginning of the 80s, the club owners were more interested in how much liquor you could sell they had packed houses. They didn't care. You didn't have to draw. They had packed houses.
So they wanted
These
guys that
folks
would
were red hot.
get people to drink
Now,
almost.
who's going to sell the drink? You go to town, they go, Ollie Joe just sold $16,000 worth of liquor. I'm like, well, my liver can't take that, but I'll do the best I can. They would drink on stage. They would drink with the audience. I would wait until I had it all mastered, you know, an hour into the show. Then I go, give me a beer, you know, then I could get off without becoming a mess, right? And I might have one or two shots up there and blah, blah, blah. But these guys would drink from the get-go. Ollie Joe would come into town, and they would have probably a quarter ounce waiting for him and a dozen Quaaludes.
A quarter ounce of Coke.
You know, yeah, a quarter ounce of Coke and a dozen Quaaludes would be waiting for him. And, of course, this was taken out of his pay at the end of the week. That's why a lot of times these guys would go to get their pay, and after all the draws they'd taken during the week, they would go like, here's $5. Out of a couple grand, really, literally. Him and John Fox were notorious road animals and partiers. And so this one night in Pittsburgh had two comedy clubs early on. I was working the one in the suburbs, and they only had two shows that night. And Ollie Joe had three shows downtown. So I was coming in to party with the people. This is back in like 80, 81, 82. I was coming in to party with the club owners and meet Ollie Joe. I'd never met him before and had heard about him. So when I got there, Ollie Joe, you could tell, man, he was in his act, third show, he's into it, but he was messed up. I could see him swaying up there, and he's drinking shots, and he's bleeding from the nose. He starts bleeding from the nose. He doesn't notice it, and he's wiping his nose, right, with his sleeve. He's got a white shirt on, white sleeve, so he's got blood streaking.
What is the crowd doing?
The ringsiders start going, oh, you know, they may have never been to a comedy show, but they were pretty sure blood wasn't supposed to be part of it. You know? They had seen this, and they start, and finally Ollie Joe sees the reaction, and he looks down and sees his sleeve is all bloody, and he goes, this is a classic line. He goes, what, you fuckers don't party?
And those were the kind of guys out there.
Yeah. So he does one more shot, right? He's like, all right, everybody, another shot. And here's where the Quaaludes and the alcohol overcame the cocaine. And he sways back and he doesn't come forward, man. He just goes, bam, falls back. And he's still got the microphone in his hand. And he's still talking like kind of, he's like kind of mumbling he just went out. And he was a little guy. He looked like Yosemite Sam, a cartoon character. He was Larry the Cable Guy before Larry the Cable Guy. He had like a real redneck trucker cowboy act, you know. Yeah. And he had a cowboy hat and he had cowboy boots. And all you see is the bottom of these cowboy boots, and you hear it, rah, 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 like, and the club owner runs over and says, "We got to get him off, and you got to finish the show."
Oh, you did.
So we run up 4 or 5 people. He's a heavy guy, man. He was a big guy, like short, round, and 4 guys carry him off. Literally carry him off. I pick up the mic and I turn to the audience and say, "Hi, folks, how you doing?" It's like as if nothing happened. You know, it's like we're shark's teeth. A comic pops out, another one pops up.
Yeah.
I just start doing the act, and later I found out that I could put Ollie Joe in the owner's car. He had a Trans Am or something, and they drive him back to the Viking Motel. That's where we were staying, this little Viking Motel. And they said they pull Ollie Joe up to the hotel, and he finally wakes up, and he goes, "Whoa, what's going on?" I'm gonna party. I said, "No, the party's over here." No, and he starts kicking the car, cash. I mean, he literally died of this disease. He never got sober.
Yeah.
There were people who tried to help him. He just couldn't quit eating and drinking, and he got very, very big and morbidly. It was, you know, it's what did him in.
A lot of guys, right? I would assume we're just loving being on the road because they go from town to town. It's like literally one step ahead of the sheriff.
You're exactly right. And you could, I mean, I could lie about my disease. I could lie about my addiction. I'd go into town, and first night, of course, somebody break up the cocaine. I go, "Oh, cocaine, man! I haven't done that in a long time." You know, right? Like it's a treat. Yeah. But I've just burned out my nose in the town before. You know? Yeah. I mean, no, it's all lies. Absolutely.
All right. So last thing, what do you tell somebody that comes in, they're trying to get sober, that's just trying to get one day? What do you tell them?
Just get the one day, man. Just get the one day. That's the only day that counts. That one day. Just get that one day. That's all it is. That was the biggest gift that I got, was being able to break it down to one day at a time. To break it down to just now, this moment. Just don't. There were days when I first got sober where it'd be like a minute at a time. I'd call up people. I'd go. I remember going like 4 or 5 places in a row looking for the answer to something, and all I was doing was just not drinking, not doing drugs, and making it through that day. That's all. That's all that mattered. I got in fist fights sober. Oh, they're the worst. I didn't drink that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's all that mattered. I'd get my people, friends of mine go, that's fantastic. You didn't drink over that. You know what I mean? Yeah, but look at my eye. You know? Yeah, but you didn't drink. It's fantastic.
And you have 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
That's great. And they get to see their dad sober.
They never did. I wish I could say they never saw me being an asshole, but they did never see me. They did never see me drink or do drugs, and that's what I hold on to. You're right. That's the most important thing.
Welcome to the human race, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They always got a chance to see me, and they got a chance to see me also make amends for when my behavior was bad, and I've always been able to do that, and we got great relationships.
Rich, thank you so much, man. I can't thank you enough for your time.
Thanks, Steve. It's been a pleasure. You've been a blast to talk to.
Yeah, thanks, man. You're a blast. I appreciate it. And are you familiar with Todd Glass?
Yeah.
So Todd's he's a really good family friend of ours. I'm from right outside Philly, and so I've known Todd. I mean, holidays and stuff. He's a good dude. He's a piece of work, right? He's a great guy.
Oh yeah. Did he ever tell you? So I used to do this joke on my act. Yeah, ask Todd about this.
Okay.
I used to do this joke on my act where I said there were so many comedians at the time. I did this thing. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called Gagway, where there's so many comics. I said comics eventually go door to door. You know, and this is what I was doing. My bit. I did this. This ended up being a video I did for Fox called Gagway. I said comics will eventually just get a flatbed truck and drive around the country, pulling in the Dairy Queen parking lot. Comedy tonight. Get a couple of bug zappers up on the back of that flatbed truck, and you do a little show, and then move on to the next town, right? So one night at the Improv, Todd comes up and goes, I bet you do about that. Yeah. Can I do that? I go, what do you mean? You want to do the bit? No. I actually want to do a flatbed truck and just drive around doing shows. I said, sure, yeah, not doesn't but one. I don't care. Yeah, fine.
Rich, in a small world situation. Yeah. So this is probably in the 90s, probably mid to late 90s. My parents are away. I guess it's early 90s. Todd is out with my brothers at this bar called Smokey Joe's in Philly getting drunk. He comes back to my parents' house, sets up that flatbed in the driveway, and starts doing comedy at 3 a.m. Thanks a lot, man. My mom and my late father say thank you very much.
Well, I might have saved him a little time, but I think he eventually would have figured it out on his own.
Richmond,
he's one of those guys, man. He is not going to be deterred from putting on the show.
Well, what a small world, dude.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
That's a small world.
Yeah.
That's a funny. You actually have a story about the flatbed truck.
Shit.
Oh
man.
My God, that's great. Fucking great. Tell him I said hello.
You got it, Rich, and I appreciate you, man. I'll shoot you this link in a couple days.
And he had one bit that I heard like a couple of years ago. This is about 10, 15 years ago. He said he sees a bird. He's driving through a shitty neighborhood, and he sees a bird. He's like, why are you living here? You can live anywhere.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
I love that joke. Yeah, he's very funny. All right, man. Thanks.
All right, Rich. Thanks, dude. Appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.